Welcome to the Brain Scrub, a somewhat improvised approach to mental health. My name is Glenn Sollers. Thanks for tuning in today. I am so blessed, honored to have on the show today a dear friend of mine, Tim, who I've only met once personally. Tim and I, we have a bit of a background. We both took the same men's awareness weekend called the New Warrior Training Adventure. And mine was done back in 2006. And Tim, when were you initiated?
2015.
2015. So I feel old.
You're an elder
I'm
brother.
like I'm an elder in the community.
Yeah.
And Tim and I have been on what's called an I group, and this is a group that forms after a men's weekend to support men through the journey of self-awareness, discovery, transformation. And that's how I actually met Tim. Was I was looking for a group here on Vancouver Island when I moved here to reconnect with the community, because I've been through a lot of different self-awareness programs. And again, I'm so blessed to know Tim because he is on our calls that we have the guy with a lot of heart, the guy with a lot of compassion and courage. And also, whenever I hear him speak, it's enviable because, again, you speak from your heart, which is something I aspire to do. So welcome to the show, Tim.
Well, thank you. I'm blushing. So yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, likewise. Yeah, it's great to have met you. And then yeah, and I think it's funny, we've known each other for years and have only met once in person. Like we see each other in these little boxes.
Exactly. I forget what the rest of you looks like.
Yeah,
Do you actually have a body below those shoulders, Tim?
no.
Oh my gosh, you're like, yeah, I train a
Don't.
lot of people like you. They're just missing the rest of their body.
Yeah,
Thanks to COVID, Zoom. Well,
that's
here we
right.
go. Yeah, we're actually doing a Zoom call, but so I can see Tim in front of me. But you won't be able to see him.
That's right.
Tim, tell me a bit about yourself and why you started this journey in the first place. I'm a bit curious about that.
Well, I grew up in a place called Williams Lake. I'll just say that. And anybody that knows Williams Lake, BC, there's yeah, it's a Wild West town. I would just let's just sum it up to that. And so that's my background. Done. No, why did I get into men's work? That's a bigger question. My wife at the time actually said, "Hey, you got to catch up with me, buddy," because at the time she was doing a lot of what's called women's work or feminine empowerment, or I forget what the program was at the time, and a lot of self reflection and improvement. And I wasn't doing a lot of that, and she was taking off. And so, yeah, I found there was an ad in the local community here on Vancouver Island to attend the initiation weekend for the Mankind Project. I had no idea what I was going into. So, yeah, that's where I stepped off and started my journey of some deep personal reflection. Previous to that, I'd done some counseling, actually, crisis and counseling when I was a teenager, like saved my life. And yeah, and so then couples therapy and some other things. So I was open to self development and was quite aimless. Now, when I look back at me, 8 years ago, I was quite aimless. I was in working a job I didn't like. I was angry. I was blame other people, but don't not tell them. So very passive aggressive. Yeah, a lot of struggles. And over the years, I've learned that I'm my biggest obstacle. Ta-da! That's
Well,
me in a
you
nutshell.
sound a bit like me because I seem to be an obstacle as well at times in my life, and also I had a similar mentality to you. And then when you did so you went through counseling, and that's great that you asked for support at a young age. You went through these different things. Well, it's not great that it happened, that you had to do it, but you sought the help. And I think that's really important. A lot of people, and this is what I'm trying to advocate for in the show as well, a lot of people don't consider mental health and the importance of it. And you and I, through influences of others as well, have taken the step and had the courage to get into this work, because it does take a lot of courage to see
Oh,
yourself and to be there. When you did the men's weekend, what was the initial feeling you had after it was done?
hmm. I was floating. I was in love with everything. I felt whole in my body. I for for a while, that inner critic, which I know we've talked about a lot, and before the inner critic quieted down for a little while, and I found space inside my own head and in my own heart, and I felt utterly connected to everything, and that was new to me, or at least without any kind of substances influencing me. Yeah, it was very heartening, and also to discover that there were a community of men who actually weren't interested in necessarily in sports, or maybe they are, but they're actually looking to go a deeper level. I have a bit of a charge with sports and the usual surface level talk that guys, I'll use that in quotes, just from my time in the Navy, and like I've done a lot of different construction trades and things like that, and just the sort of masculine way of being to me was presented. It was always like in this very toxic, demeaning form that I generally I suffered a lot at the hands of bullies, is kind of what I'm trying to spit out there. and and through this, and I believe it was just there were young men like trying to prove themselves to each other, and that happened to include beating up the long hair hippie kid.
Part of me, whenever I talk to you, Tim, it's like I start getting into my own story because of the backgrounds we had. Like I was never a long-haired hippie guy, but I definitely was bullied, and I never fit that masculine type of mold that's created at a young age, and it's still in play today, and I find it very difficult to connect on that level because I don't know anything about sports really. I don't follow that at all. Like for me, when you and I chat, there's a connection there, and nothing against people that do that. And for me, meaningful conversations are conversations about what's really going on in life with me or you, not what's going on in life with that external world out there that I really have no influence over. And maybe that's it. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, could be. And just you're touching on small talk, and I know I said yeah, I do have a bit of a charge with it, but at the same time, I'll contradict myself and say that it's also a way to build rapport. And that's something I'm learning as I study counseling, is that the small talk does serve a purpose. I guess my rub is when I become stuck in the past. That's usually when I'm not in a healthy spot. And so then I just see that overall, in general, with our society, we're in a sick kind of place. There's a lot of people hurting. There's a lot of abuse going on, and it's still tribal. And there's, which I do like tribes, but but
Mhm.
what I mean is like the balkanization, or people moving to their silos, or getting caught up in the social media bubbles that yeah, I have to opt out of. My nervous system can't handle it. And so then if I'm connecting with somebody and it's only, say, small talk, I wonder then, like, okay, well, what's real here? And I can get lost in my own head. And so what has helped me immensely is the deep social connections that I've made with men in circle, in talking about just anything, whatever's going on in your life or my life or another brother's life. We just hold it. And the trick is, like, I love this part, is like I don't have to fix anything. I just have to listen to somebody. And I've moved this from men to women now, and I'm able to hold space for both. And it's really fascinating if I just use my two ears and one mouth to speak like 50% of the time, and listen more than I talk. There's a lot that people will reveal, and are willing to go if they feel they're not going to be judged or accused. And that's what I appreciate about our relationship. And yeah, it's real. Like I can, yeah. Anyways, I see you, and I get happy thoughts, Glenn. I'm just gonna, I get happy thoughts, but and you're laughing and you're humor. Anyway.
Okay, so you mentioned something that's really resonated with me, and that is, and because this came up this week, our organization's going through a bit of a transition, which is great. However, I got some feedback from one of my bosses, and they said, Glenn, you need to spend more time not just going from point A to point B, but spending some time at the beginning, getting to know people, asking questions, having what you said, those kind of superficial conversations. What may, to me, it comes across as superficial, but maybe I'm just labeling it wrong, where to build those relationships and you getting into counseling, yeah, that's going to be a critical part, that you make that human connection. And for me, what I find, Tim, is when I am put into that situation, I feel like it's so artificial and it's out of integrity with who I am, because I know there's a hidden agenda. And my question for you is, because I don't like that kind of fakey conversation.
Right.
And but that's how I'm judging it. And it doesn't have to be that way. So part of my transformation is around getting into these conversations with people where it's okay to have small talk,
Mhm.
because that leads to that trust connection, that you're trying to get related to me, versus what I tend to do is I try to jump in and then command and control the conversation, which actually creates a bit of anxiety for me,
Mhm.
because I don't like doing that. So I'm curious, how did you make that shift, or maybe you're making that shift into what you're saying, that you're learning around, I'm learning to get out of my head and I'm learning to actually be with the other person so that they feel heard, understood, and I'm connecting.
Honestly, I had to have everything melt down and blow up. Personally, I had to crash and burn to go through, like, can be called the dark night of the soul, very intense dark period, to be able to realize that all I had to do was look at my situation from a different perspective, and I'm actually not stuck in the muck.
Can you
it's
tell, okay, can you tell me a bit more about that? So you had to look at your like things from a different perspective. What do you mean by that?
and so what I mean is I can, my like how I grew up, to me the universe is dangerous. It's a deadly place. I had to survive. I had to be meaner than the other people that were mean, like, and possibly threats. So then I can look at them as adversaries, or I can look at, and this is what I love about the, like, parts work and finding my little boy, and et cetera, is I can actually see the other person from a point of perspective of innocence, where they were a child, and what they're demonstrating now in whatever behavior that I find offensive or dangerous, it comes from the seed that was planted when they were children, how they were treated, how did they feel safe, did they were properly securely attached to their parents, did their parents beat them, abuse them, et cetera, et cetera. So they're basically just projecting at me for what, if they've got anger, somebody has anger at me, and I've been physically assaulted in the past, and I've managed to find compassion for my assailants and my two friends that were just standing there while I got beat up by this guy. And it happened so fast that nobody could react. I didn't react. And so I found a place of, like, I saw my perpetrator as a little boy who was treated pretty bad by his, and I know for a fact, like, his older brother and his dad, they beat this poor kid. And then he was coming at me and perpetrating me. And so it's the term, like, hurt people hurt people. So then when I shifted from, this person is a perpetrator and he's evil, and I found a compassion for my perpetrator as that little boy. And then that was the perspective shift that I found that gave me some peace. All of a sudden, I wasn't bad. Like, I wasn't necessarily, like, my attacker it had nothing to do with me. And I used
Mhm.
to think that it was me. I was somehow broken. I was the one that was attracting this. I deserved it somehow. And there's some other things that happened to me in my younger time, when as a baby, etc., that set me up to fall into that trap, to blame myself for my perpetrator's actions. And so part of my healing has sort of come to this place where, um it's not that I want to, like, get together with my perpetrator at all, but the idea is that I've forgiven that part of him that interacted with me in that time. And so now my perspective is more of, hey, the world can be dangerous, and I can actually create a bubble of safety around me. and that's okay. And that way, that's how I embrace the something was introduced to, is the concept of both and. So it's not like this guy's my enemy, he's my perpetrator, or like he has to live, or I have to die, but rather he's hurt, I'm hurt. How can we help each other and move forward? It's like, and recover and heal together. Well, not heal together, although that's, I can do that in the imaginal realm. I'm rambling a bit, but that allowed me, once I realized that, okay, and if there's somebody that's upset or agitated, I don't, it's not necessarily they're evil, then I'm able to relax a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And when I relax, they relax. And so it's really interesting. There's this dance that humans can do, thank you to our mirror neurons and other wonderful things that our brains are wired to do. As part of social creatures we're affected by those around us. And so then that command and control you were talking about, I see that now, that I had that when I was younger. I had to control, and that was that part of me being bigger, better, meaner. And I liked having people fear me because it meant I was safe. Well, that takes a lot of energy. So no wonder you're tired, right? You're going to be burnt out because you're trying to control everything. But the intention there behind your actions, under your actions, is to create safety. And so it's like, okay, so sure, Glenn, you could be a little uptight sometimes and you want to control the things and everything's got to be perfect. Yeah. And just stepping back and allowing, for me, the trick is not to, like, I now challenge myself so much not to control, that maybe I'm a little reckless because I'm a parent. I do need to have some control in my life. But I find a lot of peace in just letting go and going with the flow. Wow, that rhymes. That's kind of what I have to say about that. Does that answer you? Does that help? Does that?
Oh yeah, it does help. Yeah, there's a number of things you said. The one thing that I think is important to know for our listeners is that we do sometimes drag our, what you refer to as our inner child. And for those who don't know inner child, that's the things that we've learned at a young age in terms of how did we survive, how did we have to be to fit into the world that we grew up into. And there's some things, like you were mentioning, you had to instill fear in others, and you brought that with you. And it's important to know that that's not necessarily required nowadays. So you have to kind of let go of that inner child. But the other part that you said that was interesting, just for the listeners that don't know, there's something called parts work, which is really just, we all have different parts of us that keep us alive. And it's not just I'm Glenn and Tim's Tim. We have a part of us that might be an angry part of us. We might have a part of us that is super joyful. We might have a part of us that is kind. And so we have all these different parts together. And sometimes we leverage those different parts, and to understand what they're trying to do for us is really important. So I think, am I right when I say parts work is about that? It's about allowing the part of you that may be offended by something to really speak up and learn from it.
We all go through life and we have experiences, and sometimes those experiences are not a lot of fun, dangerous, or they traumatic even. And at that moment, your nervous system will have a reaction. Say somebody like I'll just go back my own, being attacked, being jumped for the first time. I was like terrified, and I had to run. And it was the scariest thing I've ever had in my life. And just even talking about right now, I feel a sensation of choking in my throat, which is crazy. And I'm not going to panic in this moment because I've done a lot of work to recognize that, oh yeah, I can just take a breath and allow that. And this is where meditation comes in. It's very helpful. Just allow the thought to pass, allow the sensation to be there. But the trick is that the sensation that I initially feel, that initial emotion, only lasts like maybe 90 seconds, unless you've got a thought going on. Yeah, the emotion will pass. I will then be able to self-regulate, which that's something. That self-regulation is I've recently discovered a reason why, like, I would just try to breathe. Like, people would say, oh, just self-regulate, like take some time, have a big breath. And that works for most people. You can pause, find that gap, and find like have a second to recognize, allow your nervous system to come down a little bit from the initial stimulus or whatever is coming at you, and then you take a breath, and the sort of the higher level functions of the brain come on, and boom, I'm safe, everything's okay. But for me, I've recently discovered, and it was really nice. I just had heard somebody talking about this, but sometimes for certain traumas, I was had several near drownings as a kid and a baby, and so then if I'm stressed, highly triggered, the breathing doesn't work. I actually, if say I'm angry, I'll be angrier. The more I try to breathe, it's like stoking the fire. And I couldn't figure out, I thought I was broken for a long time, actually, because I would try to breathe. And everybody's telling me, just breathe. I'll be okay. And here I am, trying to stop myself from entering a rage of, I have been diagnosed with PTSD, so I can blame that, but that's the old part of me. We're talking about parts. So yeah, I used to like to blame. I found that, like, now knowing that, okay, if I'm breathing and I'm feeling myself get even angrier,
Mm-hmm.
then I need to do something else. And what I did the other day was just stop, motionless, and feel the energy. And this is kind of like the part of we were getting to about allowing the sensation to pass, seeing that things are safe, and then and not listening to the thought, which can be attached to say a younger version of myself. That's where we were going with the parts. There's this, for me, I had a cacophony of voices in my head, and they would all be yelling, and the drill sergeant was the loudest, that inner critic. And so it's a part, like, yeah, there's people can learn about internal family systems, and there's other parts work out there. You can throw, yeah, but I'm not an authority on this stuff. It's just my experience is that not allowing any one voice to convince me of something, that I am XYZ, that I'm a bad,
Mm-hmm.
or I'm weak, or yeah. Anyways,
Thanks for sharing that story, by the way.
yeah,
The near drowning experiences, and that happened to you a number of times. That has an impact. And
yeah,
there's things called trapped emotions, and we have these emotions. So when you're angry, you feel like you can't breathe, and that is likely a trapped emotion that you had from early on.
yeah,
And therefore you have a physiological response. Anger leads to a physiological response, just like any emotion will lead to a physiological response. And then you can learn, well, okay, for me, I get tension in my neck when I'm angry, I can barely breathe. And then if you can rewind the clock a bit and then think, well, when did that start? When did I feel that the first time? Can you talk a bit about that connection, Tim? If you've ever thought of it that way, around this feeling like you can't breathe, almost like you're choked. And I can imagine if you're near drowning, you're probably
yeah,
you're gonna feel that way. You can't breathe.
yeah, yeah.
And how does one deal with that? And the reason I ask this question, I'm reading this book called The Emotional Code, and it talks about releasing emotions.
Okay. So I'll just start. Anybody interested in what I'm about to say? Peter Levine goes into some beautiful work about completing the trauma, or I forget what he exactly calls it. The idea is to allow your body, and there's various ways of doing this, but you allow yourself in your body to go through the process of completing the action it was trying to do in the moment the trauma experience happened. And what's fascinating is there, part of my studies watching Peter Levine, work with veterans who had been experienced an IED going off, and there was this one fella, he would tense up, and he couldn't figure out, he would like almost go paralyzed, and it drove him crazy, and his body would like seize up. And through the process, he was able to complete that action and allow his body to actually go through the motions that it wanted to do to save itself at the time. And it allowed his nervous system to come back to a regulation. And anyway, it takes lots of therapy for deep work like that. I love the idea of pendulation, or pushing myself as hard as I like, knocking myself out of this concept of the window of tolerance, where everybody's operating in a like normal sort of comfortable place is inside this box. Just envision a box, and then it's like a window. And then if I like, for my personal work, I've had to revisit some of these traumas that make me feel like I don't want to talk about them. They're quite uncomfortable. So I'm pushing the edge of that window, and then and I can push it, and then I can back off a little bit. And that then you can develop repetitions to push it a little further and back it off, and through therapy. And I actually had discovered I was doing this spontaneously, just intuitively on my own. And then so it's kind of crazy that way. That's a little digression. That I've had a lot of things happen that I've just kind of like fell into, or intuitively started to do, and then I find out later that it was actually the right thing to do. And this is one of them, is constantly building that muscle and like the resilience.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm able to, especially with the drownings are really, yeah, that was an interesting one. But anyway, to push through it would be my normal, would like a sort of like what got me through basic training in the Canadian Forces, to would be to just put my head down and push harder, because I can just do that, and or run into the wall and get up and keep running at the wall until I knock the wall down. It's don't give up. But this idea of like, I can actually just use this window of tolerance to build my resilience, to build my skills, and how I deal with the harder emotions and the things that come up. And eventually finding that, okay, I'm actually strong. I am resilient. I've tested myself enough. Yeah. And so I feel like I'm not answering your
No,
questions.
you are totally answering the question. In fact, you're more than answering the question, Tim.
I get lost in vision sometimes.
It's well, because you're, from what I'm hearing, is you're putting yourself at risk, which maybe you wouldn't have done years ago, but you're doing it, and you're creating new neurological pathways to break through it. But it takes deliberate action, and it's kind of like, and I think that's why Wim Hof, who I follow,
Yeah.
has you go in cold water. It's like nobody would ever think about going in water that's 8 degrees Celsius. And I do it maybe twice a week. And I'm
Mm.
putting myself in a situation where my body and mind is saying, you are going to die. And I'm in the water and I'm just breathing, but I'm training my system that this is not so bad. So my
Exactly.
neurology is starting to get out of stress mode and into, you know what? I'm just going in the water.
Right. And that
Right. When
intentional,
somebody's yelling at me, they're
yeah.
just yelling at me. That's it. Where I might have had a reaction earlier based on trauma that I might have experienced through a father that yelled at me all the time.
Yeah, exactly. And I find that intentional suffering, especially the cold water immersion, like, is a great way to come to presence. And like, I kind of joke, like, I can't really think about anything else other than how freaking cold it is. And when I train myself to just relax into that and breathe,
Yeah.
I'm one of the, like, I tend to just go in and work on keeping my breath stable. There's other ways of doing it. There's a whole, like, yeah, there's so many different ways to access your breath as a technology to change yourself. It's amazing. Like, yeah, with the work Wim Hof has done for inspiring people in that. But anyways, I find my crazy brain that wants to go off in a billion directions, and yeah, very visual and dreamy, I have to focus. And next thing, and then I'm like, okay, I'm checking in with my fingers, and wow, they're tingly. Okay, so I'm breathing and can feel the cold set in. And at a certain point, it just doesn't bother me anymore. And then that's exactly what you're talking about, is like being able to sit through that and still be okay. Like, that's that retraining the nervous system, that I feel that is doing that repetition to come back to that sort of homeostasis, that sense of safety. And I'm not even going to try and get into polyvagal theory right now, because like with the different dorsovagal and sympathetic nervous responses, etc. Look, I just got into it. I didn't want to, but there's so much. I'm kind of bursting with enthusiasm around this stuff because it's just wild to be learning that you're not broken. I'm not broken. Nobody's actually broken. We're people that have suffered and have others have been traumatized by systems. Really, it comes to that. Now I'm going to move into family systems and how like trauma can be passed through the generations, and it's just all this stuff I'm learning is just wild. Anyways, thing.
And then if you go back to what you were saying about what helps for these people that have been through PTSD, like you've had, and I sometimes I feel like I might have had the same thing based on some things that experiences I've had,
Yeah.
is that when we're younger, or even when we're older, we don't fully process what happened. We chop it off and then we react and have to figure out a survival mechanism.
Yeah.
And so the way I'm understanding what you're saying, Tim, is to go back to those times and actually go through the whole process without the reaction, to see it through. And just like the cold water dip, that's what we're training our mind, is that you're seeing yourself through the situation, versus when you're younger, we don't have that ability to be rational. And so I don't know if that's making any sense, but I'm wondering if that's what that means.
And now I'm feeling like I'm treading on thin ice because I'm not an authority on this stuff. I'm just really just learning about it all. It definitely.
That's why we call it an improvised approach to mental health.
Yeah,
You don't have to worry.
yeah,
I just
exactly.
I want your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, it's really interesting because we have more than one sort of brain, and like our body is a brain as well. Like our our emotions are actually stored inside our body. Like, so when I have a thought that brings me back to a time when, yeah, it was something bad happened to me, my body will have a response. It'll react in a very similar way to it tried to do or did during that event. And so, yeah, definitely, um that's the I find that so fascinating because then it gives me something I can pay attention to, I can become
Mhm.
mindful of, I can actually see, and then I can feel feel those sensations come up. And so now with that, I guess, like sitting in it, you have to be careful. Like, definitely, it's the kind of thing, especially if you've had any kind of abuse or violent traumas happen to you in the past. Like, this is the kind of thing to work through with a therapist.
Definitely.
I've
Yeah.
I've done the cowboy style, and I'm from Williams Lake, and I'll do it myself. And it's really, it can be very harming. I think I did a lot of harm to myself trying to do my roll my own gonzo approach to mental health. But definitely there's a power in like mindfulness and just coming back to breath, being present. That's like the Wim Hof stuff. I'm thinking of there's a book I absolutely like, just blew my mind. I read last year and I'm starting to read again. And it's The Body Keeps the Score. And it's Bessel van der Kolk. And he's a medical doctor and he specializes in trauma and just and it's amazing because like it comes like one of his big things is to find a physical activity such as yoga to help your body train and work through the sensations and to actually like push itself. And so I guess that's pushing your limit again. But then it stretches, and it's like using any kind of muscle, like, or like yoga, your that emotion and emotions and sensations that come up and arise, they can all simmer down a little bit instead of bubbling over.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% that you and I have been trained through our own processing, through different programs we've been through reading on how to do this thing. And if you are dealing with certain issues, especially trauma or PTSD, definitely it's best to get support through anything like this.
Yeah.
It's so important. One thing that I hear, Tim, because you and I been through a lot of work, we were going through a lot of self-reflection, and some people might or they do look at me and say, Glenn, you're hard on yourself. When is this going to end? And you've done enough work. Just stop it now and move forward. How do you, I don't know if you ever get that from people, and how do you respond? Because for me, I'll just give you my perspective. I think this work that we do, it's not always easy to understand why do it, because it does force me to go through some painful memories. It also forces me to reflect on things, to see how I own things, and to take control of my life versus having life feel like it's controlling me.
Mhm.
And if I look at a happiness index in terms of before I did MKP and all the work that I've done, I was at probably superficially probably at an 8 out of 10, but really down to a 2 out of 10 if you were to actually go down deep inside me and see it. Well, Glenn, are you really happy? To a
Mhm.
place right now where I would say I'm almost a 9 out of 10, and I have my 2 out of 10 days that I still run into. But as I've been through this work, it has been hard, and it's been like 16 years. However, I feel more like the authentic self and more heart centered, which has helped me in tremendous ways. But it took work. So, what would you say to that?
I say, yeah, it does take a lot of work. Um, and in my own personal journey, I've had a lot of people reflect on me, how they notice and hear how hard I am on myself. And
Oh yeah.
a lot of times, like so much of my work has been to accept who I am, and warts and all, like, or wrinkles and all, because I'm getting older. It's that finding that yeah, just I became so identified with the voice that was criticizing me inside my head that it was like, oh yeah, it was horrible. Like I just thinking about, if people would hear exactly what I think about and all the horrible things I say about myself, they'd be horrified. They'd be like, you can't talk to yourself that way. It's like, you're gonna drive you crazy. And then if they stop, they probably discover they're talking about themselves that way too. And so again, that's part of the being my own worst enemy. Why do the work? For some folks, it might not be worth doing the work. For some things, you could be digging in the dark and bringing up things, and for certain situations, it could be more beneficial to deal with the fire you've got in front of you and look to how can I go forward. And so in this moment, and I've had many times in that, actually, the fear of missing out would get me all the time, because I would have a thought like, oh yeah, I got to do this certain thing to improve myself or XYZ. And it's like, but then I would panic because I'd be doing something else, and all of a sudden I can't forget. I got to do this real important thing. I just learned to trust myself that eventually I'll come back to that. And so
Mm-hmm.
learning self-acceptance, trust, um, and a certain amount of detachment in external events, like especially that control. You mentioned control a couple times. That's a very painful thing to try and hang on to. Very exhausting trying to control the world and make.
Mm-hmm.
And so by letting go that, okay, I've actually got no control over you or anybody else. Like, I can influence you, I can say things to you, we're human, and that'll change your thinking in some ways as you hear my words. And at the same time, there is no direct control. So the big piece is that I can only really control my own thoughts, or my reaction to my own thoughts. It's actually in my mind, because the thoughts will come and go, and so I don't necessarily control my exact thoughts. But my point is that there's like, even my body, I don't fully control. I can get a disease, there's things that happen, I get sick, I have no control over that. So then detaching from that desire to control for that safety, and instead I found there's an easier yeah, self-acceptance is easy. Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
Self-acceptance is easy. Okay. I want to take that course.
You know,
Where do they offer it, Tim?
yeah, no kidding. It's this, yeah. By detaching from that control of it externally and coming back to being like, oh, I could really have some control over my reactions to my thoughts, and I can choose what I believe. And that's one of our elders would say, yeah, notice and choose, it's like, yeah, it's like, I notice that this is going on. I notice this sensation's coming up, and I can choose to do what I used to do, which is freak out and rage and blah, have a big mess in aisle 12 to clean up, or I can choose something different. And it's really interesting how it is in the space of a breath cycle, that everything can be reset. And for me, it's like pouring fire on. So no,
Mm-hmm.
so that mindfulness. I'm just reminded that there is no one solution for anything. That's kind of what I really like about your podcast, is it you're not saying that this is the one way to do anything. It's like, it's a bit of it. There's lots of different ways to accomplish the same task. It's like, what works for you, and what fits and what serves. And back to like, do I need to do my work right this moment and get it all over with? Because honestly, when I came out of that initiation weekend, I thought, right on, hands are clean, I'm done, good. I didn't realize that it was going to be a rock and roller coaster through all my shadows and demons and my worst fears, and come out on the other side and feeling good. And then, oh, wait, no, got to dive back in, because there's more stuff coming up, because of course life around me is still going. I can't control that. Things are coming up, and with kids and marriages and all kinds of fun things. And yeah, it's quite a journey. And the biggest piece I've come away with is, I can't do it alone. As a human creature, I am socially wired. Like, my brain is wired for connection. I am hurt inside of relationships, and I also heal inside of relationships. And I'll just squeeze this in. It's like, big piece of my counseling program has been to get this concept that every person is responsible for 100% of their 50% of any relationship, a relationship between two entities, two people, whatever. I can only do that. Any more over functioning, any less under functioning, etc. We could talk about anxiety binding patterns, but we'll leave that for another time. But the idea is that, like, I all of a sudden, when I had that and I got it, I was like, whoa, big weight came off my shoulders. Don't have to control. I just have to extend out. Another person extends out. We make contact. Boom, we have something happen. And yeah, anyways, I'm tickled. And then that go to your happiness and joy. Like, my authentic happiness and joy has actually gone up, even though I've gone through a pretty hard year, and I'm still in the middle of a hard year. So it's
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
You
Anyway.
said notice and choose, and one thing I'm learning through all the books that I'm reading and just life in general is that we don't necessarily take the time to notice.
Mm.
And then we're also busy, like you were saying, you just go, do. And to take that time to just notice, then we can make different choices. I love that term that you use. The other thing I was going to share that you shared was, yeah, they say that if you look at almost every human being out there, about 80% of our thoughts are negative.
Yeah.
20%. So one out of every five thoughts is a positive thought. And this is just a human tendency. And apparently we're designed that way because that kept us alive. We always had to be watchful around what's going on. Like, that woolly mammoth could eat me. If I start saying it's not going to eat me, then the human race would not have progressed. And not that the human race has progressed much anyway. Sometimes I see it that way. However, it was interesting, Tim. One thing that happened was, I'm sure I had a lot of anxiety when I was a kid. In fact, I know I had a lot of anxiety. I was never diagnosed. And then I kind of dealt with it. So the anxiety was kind of repressed in a way. And I just did things, but I still wasn't always being my best self, or I knew I was doing things that I shouldn't have done. And then I started doing this work 16 years ago. And after I started doing this work, yeah, after the weekend, like you felt, I was like, wow, I am great. And everybody else is great. I'm the problem. And I was so happy. But then I noticed my anxiety levels went up again. And they've been eventually coming down. And as you know, like I haven't seen my son for almost 7 years now. And that's been a huge identity challenge for me is losing that identity as a father, or what I grew up to see a father as, so to speak. But it was that curve. So when I started doing self-awareness work, it wasn't like it was curing my anxiety. It was actually inviting more anxiety. And I wonder if that's because I was bringing stuff up that maybe I've been holding in my body, and then I'm starting to bring it up, which releases parts of my body, releases my tension, releases different brain patterns, which takes a lot of work, and it could cause anxiety because all of a sudden I'm being somebody who I'm not used to, right? Because anxiety is being in a place of, I don't know what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never made this connection, Tim, until we're talking today.
Okay.
And I'm thinking maybe that's what was happening. So as I now am dealing with that, as I'm getting into who I really am, and I'm taking the actions that I'm committed to taking, I still have work to be done, but my anxiety levels are dropping off, as are my stress levels, and hopefully my tension in my body, all those different things. But there was that curve. And I don't know, is that a common thing to happen? Does that make sense?
Um, I'm not sure about a curve, but it to me it makes sense that your anxiety would go up. I recently had a client describe making that personal leap or growth as being like they tied it to the metaphor of being in new territory. So if you're in a new part of the wilderness, you don't know what's there. So then you're going to be heightened. It's going to be more anxious. You just, that's your baseline level comes up because the brain, like you said, like the brain is focused on survival, and we are negatively biased. That's another thing to explore if listeners are into it, is yeah, checking out various tests to check out what implicit biases you're actually holding, because that again comes back to that perspective, and your biases will color your perspective. Anyways, but back to the new territory. It just, when a fella said that, I just clicked. I was like, wow, there. I'm like, so back to the personal work, like here I am, and here you are. You're like, all of a sudden you're looking at everything. I'm looking at all the stuff that has ever happened in my life. It's overwhelming. So then I run away from it. My anxiety goes up. I want to run, but I'm in that new territory and I don't know where to run. So it's extra scary. And so then just taking the time to slow down has been absolute key to the mindfulness. Because if, and I used to, my inner critic would blame me for being slow and stupid, but it's actually, it's a, I find that my thought processes can go a little too fast sometimes. And if I can take a breath, slow down, I can come back to some coherence, recognize that I am in that sort of new space, that new territory. And I really just need to stop, look, listen, notice what's going on around me. Is this safe? Oh, is there anything that I need attention, that needs attention right now? And coming to that sort of a place of calm will only happen after many repetitions, of course. As like, because I don't know, I don't know, but I'm not sure about you, maybe this resonates, but when I first started this work, and I felt that, okay, I'm all one and done, and then I realized I wasn't. I saw this huge mountain way in the distance that I now am walking toward, and it's called enlightenment. Like, I'm gonna be good, I'm gonna be
Thanks
healed
for listening.
at the top of that mountain. And it's took like each step, like every time I go into men's circles, and spending the hours working on my own stuff, and helping others, holding space for others, has just really been one step at a time. And now, after many years, yeah, I can look back and go, holy moly, I was so anxious. I didn't even know I was anxious in the beginning. But now here I am, much further on the journey. I look up, mountain is still really far away, which is like,
Well, shouldn't it be closer?
but
I should know the shortcut now. There's got to be a direct route up here. Where's the gondola?
yeah,
Where do we? Where do I buy my tickets?
and come back that it really is the journey. And so, like,
Yeah.
relaxing and not having that end goal. And I'll just tie back to that, my comment about being detached. Like, I'm not attached anymore to crossing a finish line. I'm not attached to like checking off, yep, personal project of Timmy is over. Yay. Like I've just come to an acceptance that I'm not going to stop until I'm dead. And that's not a bad thing. It's not morbid. I'm not scared of it.
No, no.
It's actually kind of cool because I've got something to do for the rest of my life. I'm never going to be bored.
No, exactly. Because we can divert our attention to different things, but it's just materialistic things at times. But by working on the me, I'm actually working on the we. And I
Yeah.
want to get into that, right? Because you mentioned something about tribe. And to close out the show, I just want to have a conversation about this because I've been trying to advocate for the importance of community as you have, that you sometimes like we don't have to do life alone. Even though when I grew up, I felt I had to do life alone. Nobody was there to say, you know what, Glenn? Oh, you know what? Your dad's yelling at you. How do you feel? Okay, let's work through that. No, I didn't have that. So I learned I can only count on me.
Mhm.
And one of the transitions was, you know what? I don't have to be afraid to count on other people. So tell me a bit about community, Tim, and the importance of community for you.
Oh, community. It's it's definitely central to my peace and happiness, to my safety, to abundance that I experience, and a lot of heartbreak too. Community is a place like I like to envision human beings. We're kind of like a picture everybody forming a human net, and it's like we're all holding hands, and we're all maybe got a hand on somebody's foot and you're hanging onto their leg, and we're just this big net stretched over, and there's other people that are falling down through the sky and we catch them like that. Like anybody that falls gets caught. The social safety net really is each of us, every single individual in your local neighborhood, and your wherever you happen to be listening to this, is like your neighbors next to you. If like, just imagine if power goes out or there's some disaster, like that's why people pull together. Like, whoever's around, can you help? Yeah, okay. Or sometimes people like to loot and hoard, and that's another thing, but just trying to get their needs met. And so in community, I found a lot of healing. And one of the when I a brother and I, we started our own little I group. It started as a MKP group, but we had an intention 4.5 years ago, or probably 4 years ago, to create community. Like I didn't want to just sit in circle with these guys or this guy, because it was really only myself and my brother, and we had no idea who was going to show up. But the intention was to not just be circle, but to actually be community. And what does that mean? Well, over 4 years, we've developed a solid core. There's 5 of us currently, and for example, I have worked and had gotten money for my services from every single one of my brothers, and I've met their families, and we share time outside of circle, and we'll help each other. Like, somebody during the week has a crisis or needs help, there's usually at least one of us is available. We're all busy. We all have various states of life. Some of us married, some of us separating, and others are single and happy. And I'm very envious of them. No, just kidding. Um, like, there's a window. So
Mhm.
right there, I can be inspired instead of envious. I've learned to be inspired by my brothers, and I can also see and get to know them. And so the other night in circle, I was struggling with something, and one of my brothers, he's like, "Dude, I know what's going on with you." I'm like, "What? You don't know that? Come on." And he's like, "It's your birthday." And I was like, "Yeah, oh, yeah." And he's like, "Every year you go through this." And so the magic of that tight community, and having a community members in that inner, I call it like the inner core, like I'm in the middle. That's me in the center of the circle. And then my immediate supports, they know me. There is no hiding. They know everything. And I'm not going to go into that stuff because we're right now talking a couple circles out, like, so I have that sense that what's appropriate. And but that knowledge that my brother had it helped remind me of something that I don't even see because I'm in the muck. I'm the fish in water and doesn't realize I'm in water.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Like so he shined the light that I get anxious and upset every year around my time of birth. And when I think about my time of birth, it was quite very traumatic. It was a traumatic experience for my mother. It was a traumatic for me as a baby coming out a month premature and put in an incubator and I didn't have any real contact and I was hungry. Like I devoured the baby formula. I like and within 3 days I had to go home. But I wouldn't have lived without medical intervention, like in the wild, so to speak. And so traumatic right from go and yeah, I can get caught in that. But so the piece of having that community to me means there's accountability and a place for me to show up with integrity. Like I can practice being well, the communities I find myself in, my authenticity is a strength. So even like and I'm in a range of different communities, not just men's communities, but like I see myself as this a sovereign individual moving through, looking to see where I can help my neighbors because like ultimately I'm selfish. I want to help them so that I feel safe. And I
Yeah.
think the piece that the lone wolf sort of survivalist sort of mentality. I want to get into the topic of apocalypse right now this late in the interview, probably not, but anyways, it's I see that as that was a false image that I had growing up, like Mad Max. I wanted to be Mad Max. I want to be alone, traveling the desert with my dog. And the reality is that guy like dies of thirst, because
Yeah.
it's the people maintaining the well and the community around them that get the food and so that they can maintain the well. And this is human society, everybody. We're these small like it's just I'm gonna go visual, but like circles of circles and think of chainmail. That's to me that's community. It's holding together tight, can take an arrow and stop it without it won't penetrate the heart. It can save your life. And it is hard. It's hard to forge and it's also hard to break. And once it's broken, it can be difficult to repair. So that's where the interpersonal skills inside of community is so important. Like individuals have to be able to deal with first our own shit. First I have to deal with my shit, and then I can help you deal with your shit. And then we can help our others around us with their stuff. And now I'm thinking like at a first responder, and it's like the emergency scene. I'm just going in and creating some safety and order inside of that chaos and trying to not to do any more damage than what's already been done, and moving outwards, creating a safe net, and everybody gets to I don't know, I fall back to it's all about the babies. So everything in community should be about the babies and those that protect the babies. We got to make a life and with purpose around
Yeah,
that.
and it ties into tribe as well. Just that for a tribe, everybody needs to be there for one another, supportive. If there's something in the tribe that's not working, it needs to be rectified, right? Because then you make you could be risking the entire tribe, so to speak,
Yeah,
right?
the group will suffer if you
Yeah.
like go hunting and bring back something that appears to be dead, but it's not. It's in the village. Next thing you know, it wakes up. I didn't do my job properly. There's gonna be real consequences. The bear wakes up, anyways.
Well, Tim, we're gonna close the show on that note because I want to share that one thing you don't make me do is suffer. So I love being in community with you. You are able to role model exactly what you explain that people do with each other in the community is call people out on their stuff, help people work through things so that people don't have to feel alone.
Yeah.
And you are such a gift for me in my life. Just a couple things. When Tim said brother, we use that terminology as a mankind project because generally when men come in, they feel they're all alone. And then we realize, you know what, we're not. We all have things that we're dealing with, and we are brothers. And by doing that, one of the things that happens after these weekends is we trust everybody that we went to this thing with 100% with our lives, because we realize that we are people of integrity, that we want to do the best thing, that love is so important. And just even something, the simple act of hugging another man
Mm.
is something that is so rewarding, and a huge gift in all this work is to be in a place where you can hug somebody else, trust them, love them. And Tim, I love you. Thank you for being on the show. Really appreciate this. Thanks for listening.